here's our person again. She's thinking, well, I need to design for e-learning. I'm not going to just rush into the delivery. I want to pause and I'm going to design something for e-learning. So we've got to think, well, what's she thinking about? Now, one of the things I've noticed in my humble career is this phenomenon. This is an example of what not to do. Okay, this is a limited content-centered approach when you're designing e-learning. Now, Wikipedia and YouTube links and PDFs, they're great. And sometimes a big hook comes along and collates them and just puts them into the internet. They kind of shovel them up into the internet, and then there's e-learning magic. That is a really limited, that's a good start, and it achieves a certain kind of aim. It certainly allows students to access materials, but it doesn't have a lot of other things going on. It's not really designed for the process of learning necessarily. So when we look back at our considerations of how we're going to plan and design, all of these things come into our thoughts that are maybe some are related to the content, some are related to other elements, like the learning modes, for example. So here's our person that transformed from face-to-face to online. I mean, in this situation, most e-learning would be a blended experience, I would imagine, but some courses are 100% online.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So here's a cassette tape from a previous era.
Eons ago. Nice. Hey, I remember cassette tapes. Great.
Oh, that's good. So luckily for us, the process of design is very similar now, as similar to what it was in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s. So that technology of the cassette tape is probably not going to be what we're choosing. It's not going to be suitable for our purposes. We've got lots of replacements like podcasts and other online digital options. However, it's important to note that the driver is always better to be not the technology. You should be considering your learning and teaching first, and then pick the technology that's most suitable. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the technology can be very seductive and it can hijack your thinking, mm-hmm. but this gets very complicated. I could speak for a whole day on just this one slide, but we're going to move on to this one. There's so many options, lots and lots of options of online tools to use, not just podcasting. I'm sure podcasting's in there somewhere, but I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, SAMR, SAMR. It's a model of how do you use technology. Now, around the rim of the circle, you can substitution. There's no functional change. It's just kind of it's very similar to what maybe face-to-face. You could take the approach of augmentation, mm-hmm. where you're improving the function a little bit, or modification, or the ultimate, which is redefinition. You're creating new tasks that were previously inconceivable. So we'll return to this concept shortly, but clearly that's a very busy slide and we can't even read the detail. It's a good symbol of how much is available on the internet. Sure. Mm-hmm. So just to give us a little breathing space, here's a poem. We're not going to read that poem out, but it's a piece of educational content. I would think most people will agree. Here's a poem that might be used for a high school class, for example. That's not the only piece of content. Another might be some legislation, for example, if you're studying building or something. Now, sometimes teachers that are not used to teaching or online, they might grab this 25-page piece of legislation and pop it into their online course with the instruction, please read this, with no context, no associated activities, no follow-up. So for people that are just new to this, it's not so good. It's not so pleasant. Same with educational research. This is a research article for science students, that it's without a context, it's kind of a bit of a problem. This is where the design aspect comes in. Mm-hmm. So let's go back to our poem. And the original activity is a poetry lesson. Read the poem in a printed format. So if we put that online as our little hook to remind us that it's gone online, there's no functional change. We've just substituted what was on a piece of paper to what's online. But with design thinking, we can start to augment that. We can add online dictionary, for example, figure out what certain words mean, study guides, other supplementary reading, for example. If we modify it as this student is listening to the poem, and then if we redefine completely, it's a little bit hard to see, but this is an online mapping tool.
Sure.
So we might be mapping, what did the poet mean by the kind of road? What is a road? Is it a literal road or is it something else? It can get very complex.